So although I'm using a suction to start off this procedure, it was very apparent immediately almost that that is not going to be removed just by using suction. The wax plug was very dry, very embedded, and this is really, really deep in the ear. It's lodged beyond the isthmus. Now, typically I try and resist the urge of using mechanical instruments like hooks and scoops and not so much forceps, but hooks and scoops, so jobs and horns, when the wax is in the inner 2/3. That's because if we come in contact with the bony part of the ear canal, which is the inner 2/3, it can be very sensitive and uncomfortable for the patient. There was the slightest of openings here, so I tried to get the hook behind it, but it was just too lodged. Fortunately, the forceps came to the rescue. Even then, it was quite tricky. You can see the skin adhesions at the bottom that were adhering itself not only to the wax plug, but also to the surface of the ear canal. And it serves like a double-sided sticky tape, this dead keratin, and it can make it really, really tricky to extract the wax and detach it from the canal wall. So I brought this plug of dry wax and skin out of the isthmus. It was right up against the eardrum. Just using the hook now to bring it out from the ear canal. You can just see how dry that is. So the patient has got a bit of eczema of the ear canal, the otitis externa. There's the eardrum. You can see the dip with the ear canal. It goes up and down, and it got trapped there. So this is patient 2. Now, this patient's got a dry plug of wax. It's quite aged. You can see by the colour it's oxidized. It's near the entrance. There's a slight opening at the roof. So I'm going in with a Jobson horn. I think with this patient, they've got a mastoid cavity, and we purposely try to avoid suction wherever possible because the patient suffers from the caloric effect because of their mastoid cavity. So their mastoid cavity is what we call a modified radical mastoid cavity. They previously had a cholesteatoma. So the cholesteatoma is a very dangerous, almost life-threatening infection of the attic region of the eardrum, where the eardrum can get sucked in and it creates a pocket, a cave, and then you can get dead skin that sort of migrating out of the ear. It gets trapped in that pocket, and the skin can then get infected and grow further. It can grow into the middle ear and upwards towards the brain. It can lead to a brain abscess, meningitis. So what the surgeon did, they had to get access into the middle ear, and this cholesteatoma had grown into the mastoid bone around the back of the eardrum. So they had to chisel out the bone of the ear canal. You can see top right there. So that's the patient's attic region. They had to literally scrape out the bone and then remove all that cholesteatoma that was there, that dead skin, and then they positioned, when they put the eardrum back on, so when you get access to the middle ear, they lift the eardrum, almost like a door. They dissect it, lift it up, create a flap, chisel out all the bone, get access. The reason for the chiseling out the bone is to get access to that cholesteatoma, remove all the cholesteatoma, and then they reposition the eardrum back on. And sometimes what they do, the eardrum itself, it can then rest up against the vestibular organ, which is a semicircular canal, which is in the inner ear, but the horizontal semicircular canal. So there's 3 semicircular canals at different angles, different planes, which work in tandem to help you with your balance. And because so the horizontal one is protruding outwards, it's more lateral, sometimes called the lateral semicircular canal. It hasn't got the bone then any longer to protect it, so it's more susceptible to temperature change. And when we suction, it reduces the temperature, which then can inhibit the organ of balance, which then sends wrong information to the brain, and the brain thinks you're moving and you're not, and it's what we call the caloric effect, and you can get dizzy, vertigo. So I would think in the left ear in particular, so the first ear, this is the same patient, this is just their right ear. You can see there's no mastoid cavity there. But again, just used the Jobson horn, managed to remove all this wax laterally. But in particular the left ear, they've had cases in the past where they've had suction being performed and they've felt very faint, nauseous, and they suffered from violent vertigo. It was short lasting, but it was very off-putting, the patient advised. So this is patient 2. I think we're almost finished there. So there is some lateral wax on the posterior canal wall. Now, I did ask the patient, if I remember correctly, if they've been using cotton buds, because to me it looks like some cotton wool fibres are stuck to this. The patient says no, so it could alternatively be a bit of a fungal infection. You can get fungal, the stems of fibres look like cotton wool fibres, then you can sometimes get spores developing. So we're going to keep an eye on that, and if it is a bit of fungal infection, the patient can use some Canesten ear drops to assist. You can see how we're just using the Jobson horn just to gently, now because on the cartilaginous portion we can apply some pressure. It doesn't mean we want to be overly aggressive here, so we don't want to bruise or make the canal wall tender in any way. We're just making contact with it and then rotating the Jobson horn to just detach it from the canal wall. And in a minute you'll see the third and final patient. So that's the patient's eardrum, nice and healthy. So this is patient 3. Just started off with suction just at the entrance. Now their ear temperature is quite higher than usual, which caused a bit of misting initially of the glands. I soon realised suction's not going to be the right tool, so using an ear hook, and I'm trying to get in and behind this dry piece of wax, so there's a flake of skin there as well. The patient's got a very narrow slit ear canal. You can see everyone's ear canals, or most people's ear canals, it's oval shaped, so the height is greater than the width. In this patient's ear, I would say the height is significantly more greater than the width. It's more elongated. There's a lot more narrow, which makes it more tricky. And again, I want to avoid, if possible, inserting the hook into the bony part of the ear canal, but there's a bit of a gap anteriorly and also to the roof, so I did attempt to get in and behind. Just gone back in with the suction bud to see if I can bring this a bit forwards. I think in a moment I'm going to use some forceps to extract it a bit outward laterally, and then use the hook in combination. Whilst you're watching that, I'll just answer some of the questions from yesterday's video. Someone wanted to know when hairs are plucked from the ear, if it's uncomfortable or painful. Patients tolerate it really, really well. It's a little probably sharp pinch, but that's it. I've never had anyone really complain that it's uncomfortable and to the point where I need to stop. Another question was about the cost of these instruments because they're single use. In terms of what we charge for the procedure, it's a very, very small cost. So I can't tell you exactly because there's something for each one. Will be there for a while, but they're very cost effective, these single use instruments. Someone else wanted to know what software I use to edit my videos. I used to do it all on the desktop. I used to use quite an expensive video editing suite, Coral, but it was taking so much time transferring the video from my iClearscope to the desktop and then editing it and then rendering it, and I'm now just using my iPhone. I've got an app, and so there's some bits that, so they may not be the most professional videos in the world, but it's just so much more easier for me. I was spending a lot of hours at the clinic after work editing videos on my desktop. It was not very time efficient way of doing it. With this on my phone, I can do it at home now as well. And the suite itself, the software I'm using, the app, it's quite good actually. It's very user friendly, and I can narrate. So I'm talking into my iPhone right now whilst I'm doing this video. Someone asked whether we prescribe drops because the patient in the last video, once we removed that really dry plug of wax, ear was a bit red. That's just normal. Sort of see the ear's got some. We've detached a plug of wax from the ear, the canal wall, so naturally it'd be a bit red. There doesn't need any drops whatsoever. That will just settle within a day or so. I'll just quickly come back to the video. So I've removed that plug, eardrum's nice and healthy, it's visible in the distance. I'm now just using the hook, so not the pointed bit, but the edge of the hook, where the 90-degree bend is, to almost chisel out this wax on the cartilaginous portion to remove it, some dry skin there. I'm just going back with the suction to help me with that. There was another question about the patient in the last video, because they had a narrow ear. Does that mean that they'll have to get the wax removed more frequently? It's quite possible. When you've got narrow ears, it's more likely. The rate of migration of the skin is the same, but the wax can get trapped because of the narrowness around the bends and twists. Someone else wanted to know whether if they wear earplugs in the ear and they've got wax, whether it can push it further in. Yes, it can, unfortunately. So if you are a waxy person and you suffer from wax build-up in the ear, anything that goes in your ear can impact it further in the ear. Someone asked a really good question, is whether I've made mistakes and learned from mistakes. Yeah, we all make mistakes. No one's perfect. And when I'm training my clear wax delegates, I do. That's where I can teach them better, because through my own mistakes and mishaps, I can pass on that knowledge. And by watching these videos back as well, I can always evaluate myself, see what I could do better. It's just part of these videos that I do. It's also educational for myself to reflect upon the procedures I've performed and learn from that. I think someone wanted to know if you've got a narrow ear and you sleep on that ear, will that affect the migration? No, so the migration to the skin will be the same. It's just, obviously, sleeping on that ear can help in a way because the gravity will assist the wax coming out as the skin migrates. But again, it's all to do with the shape and size of the ear. So I wanted to know about autoclaving the suction probes. They're single use because they've got a lumen, the internal obviously cylinder where the wax is sucked up. So when you've got a lumen device like that, they're typically single use because it's very, very hard to fully clean the inside of that lumen, the hole that runs through the suction probe. Someone asked about the function of these hairs and their importance, they say, and I think they answered their own question. They say the hairs in the nose, the ears, they're your first line of defence. You're part of your immune system, the innate immune system. The first line of defence, they trap any debris, particles that enter in the ear, so they filtrate the air as well. I think they slightly got confused. So we've got little microscopic stereocilia, which is hair cells in the organ of hearing. So that's not the same hairs as at the entrance of the ear canal. And they can get damaged to noise exposure or head trauma or medication or various reasons, but most typically age-related hearing loss. And it's those little hair cells that produce an electrical signal in response to sound, which then is sent to the brain, we perceive that sound. Another question was asking whether it's common for the ear anatomy from the left and right to be slightly different. No, I would say that's quite common. You get a general similarities, but it's never exactly the same. It's like your left and right foot. I think I read some article as well. So if you have a photo of yourself and get a line in the middle, if you then closely look at your left and right side of the face, there is some similarities there. And I think someone was doing it with some famous movie stars, and they did this line down the centre of their face, and then they copied and pasted and rotated one side of the head so it fitted the other side. So both sides of the hair, one side of the head was reflective on the other side, if that makes sense. It's almost like a mirror in the middle of your face. And the person looked completely different. So yeah, there's always going to be asimilarities between ears, like other parts of the body. Someone asked why others advocate the use of water in the ear to remove earwax. If I can shed any light on it, if I'm honest, I can't. I'm probably going to have to ask those people that are doing it. Water, speak to any ENT as well. Water is the arch enemy of the ear. The less opportunity water gets into the ear, the less likely it is to arise and cause an ear infection. Someone made just a comment about the focus and clarity of the other video, and they wondered whether it was the hairs that was causing that. So the video was not out of focus. Yeah, it's just when you've got a narrow ear canal, the wax is right in front of you, so it's quite lateral. You've got these hairs there, so naturally you're not going to get the clearest of images. And I think I did mention that in my video, but it's not affecting me. whereby I can't remove that wax. There are certain cases where there's so much hair there where it's very difficult to see, where I do have to use some forceps and pluck some of those hairs. But so I hope that answers that. And I think the final question was whether this particular patient on the last video, they had come before, and the question was whether we have a specific time frame. It's like a pre-management phase, so we remove the wax before it becomes an issue. Yeah, with that patient, I think, I can't remember it, but we looked at the diary and we analysed the last time they came, and we asked them to come a bit more frequently. That does vary from individual to individual. Some people have to come every 3 or 4 months, some people it's years. So I always recommend, if you are a waxy person and just say every 2 years your ears get completely blocked to the point you can't hear, I would just advise getting it removed every 18 months. For most people, it is like clockwork. It's almost like a perennial thing every year, or you'll be able to gauge the time frame. I mean, you do sometimes get variation. Sometimes people just have to get it done every year, but on a one-off occasion, for whatever reason,